All right, man. So this is gonna be a real quick video, unedited. Uh, so it's gonna be my testimony, basically, of how I or why I came into the Christian faith, what led to it, and what I've gained. Right. I think that this is long overdue. Um, Ever since I was a little kid, man, I always had an idea, right, of God and Jesus and stuff. And I remember as a little kid, sitting in the swings, I would imagine like, rope bridges, if that makes any sense. Those old style types of bridges, and like God walking, in the skies, you know, just patrolling everything, right? I remember I used to imagine that as a kid, and religion wasn't really a thing that was enforced in the house. My grandma actually, on my dad's mom, right? She would make an attempt to take us as kids, me and my cousins, to church, right? Catholic Christian, for the most part, in Hispanic households, or the culture is one of Roman Catholicism, right? And so I never understood what was being said. A lot of the sermons were in Spanish, but I just remember dreading as a kid, right? Like, why do we have to get up early to go here? Right? I don't even understand what the guy's saying. But it was, as a kid, you just want to play and hang out with your cousins. So anytime that you could spend with them, or that I could spend with them, it was, regardless of what we were doing, it was always going to be fun, right? My mom, every time as kids, coming up, she would tuck me and my sister in bed, and she would pray, right? She would pray over us, and she would say, like, God, send your angels to surround this bed, and protect us and guide us, and stuff like this, right? Every night she would do this, and then eventually, right, I guess coming into the teen years, this kind of started going away. Whether it be because of school or whatever it was, and I became somewhat of a cynic or heretic, if you will, of the faith. And I didn't believe, I had a concept, but I was eventually mocking this whole thing, right? I would make fun of it. I would make fun of my friends who believed in it, and I was like, why do you believe in something that doesn't make any sense, And nasty comments, nasty words in regards to that, on my own, calling out God, and cursing him, and all this, and just being a real rebel, I guess, if we could word it like that, because it was true, right? I would even make fun of my parents. I would tell them, like, you all are crazy. Why do you all believe in something so stupid like this, right? What God, right, forgives rapist or a murderer, or that's no God of mine. Because at an age, at least for me, thinking with my own reasoning, and what I could understand, or how it was that I understood it, and apparently I understood everything at the time. And it wasn't until two things happened. An uncle of mine, my mother's youngest brother, right, had a tragic accident in somewhere in the outskirts of Houston, Texas, coming back from home in the morning hours. And I'm talking about morning hours, man, 3 a.m., 2 a.m., somewhere around there. He had a tragic accident, and he passed away. He was essentially, ejected through the windshield, and he was alone. He was in the back roads, and I guess it took a long time before somebody saw what happened and found him, and he passed away. And I remember that morning, that when this happened, I was still living in my parents' house, And I just remember my dad opening the door to my room, and he just said, "Wake up, your uncle's dead," right? And you're still like, right, still thinking about yourself. You're kind of upset, like, at least for me, I was thinking like, why are you coming in here? I'm still sleepy, and you're coming in here and you know, making jokes, I guess. And I was angry, but I was hearing my mom wailing in the living room, right, of our house, wailing. And I noticed that, this something is going on. This is no joke. This is real. So immediately, just wake up, and it's surreal, man, when this happens, right? And I go to the living room, and then I see my mom, and she's just, his name was Eduardo Longoria, right? We called him Lalo. And my mom just kept saying, like, Lalo, and it was a very, very hard day, man. Very hard day. We ended up going to our grandparents' house, right? Her parents. We ended up going to their house. They live in Las Lomas there. And, we walk into the house, right? And I took shades with me, right? Like, I took a pair of sunglasses because I didn't want anybody to see me crying. And it's all surreal. It's like a dream. It's like you can't believe it's happening. You're trying to make sense of it, and you're like, oh, what happened, right? As far as all I knew, the information was that he had died, and it didn't make any sense, right? It's like, well, he didn't have any particular health risks or anything like that, right? So till then, to that point, I didn't know, or we didn't know what had happened. But here is where I picked up on some things. My grandfather, right, my mother's dad, he was a Christian man. I never, through my growing up as a kid to the time that I knew him, not once did I ever hear him cuss. Did I ever see him upset? To the points that I would get, for him to act in anger or selfishness or greed. He didn't operate like that. He was a devout Christian. We walk into the house, right, and everybody's there. The whole family, right, is there. All my other uncles and aunts and cousins. Everybody's there. And we go into my grandmother's room, right, to go and see grandma, right. And grandpa's there. And grandpa, he's a real short man. Like, I remember he would say, like, they call me Tito, right? He would say, like, oh, watchense en la espalda de Tito, este es bueno pa'l talache, right? Which is like, in English, it's like, he's good for the pickaxe, right? Because of my broad shoulders and I'm a kind of a big dude, right? And he was really short. He was like, he would reach me to like about right here, but he played the accordion, and he would donate his time. He would actually go and sing to inmates for free. He would go in and sing to them, Christian songs and in nursing homes and stuff. And so he was real charitable in his works. We walk into the room, man, and my grandma is breaking down. My uncles are there. My aunts are in the same room. Everybody's breaking down, man. And I see him in the corner, just there. And he's the only one holding it together. He's the only one strong enough for everybody else, And I remember looking at him, and I thought to myself, like, he has God, He knows the truth, right? That's sustaining him, that's giving him strength, where he could be strong for everybody else, And everybody's a mess, man. It's a mess in that room, right? I myself, through my glasses, and I'm wondering to myself. I ask myself this question, and I say, like, I don't tell him, but in my mind, I'm like, dude, it's okay to cry, like, if I could have told my grandpa that, like, it's okay, your son died, man, like it's okay, it's okay to cry, but he wouldn't. It was just there, a little man. A lot of people might have just overlooked his value, What does this old man, have to offer anybody, right? But still, to be a rock for everybody else, at least for me, when all this is going down, And he looks at me and he just says, in Spanish, he tells me, like, Tito, se nos fue Lalo, Which means that, Lalo left us, right? And, I have that memory, so vivid, man. But I remember I told myself, I said, I know he knows the truth, I know he's in the light. And I need to do my best to attain what he has, to have that. And everything else doesn't matter. Just have that at least, Well, they end up going to Houston. I didn't end up going. We were, they had originally planned, my family, that we would go the next day as a family, all of us together. But, it is what it is, right? It's their son, so they took off right away. We weren't there. Me and my dad came back home. And, we're trying to make sense of what's happening, And then we heard, hey, pues everybody's going already, and we took off without you guys. So I didn't get to see the funeral. I didn't get to attend it or anything. Eventually, later on, in 2019, when I got baptized by Joel Osteen, we ended up visiting the town of Alvin, is what it's called there in Texas, and I ended up going to his grave, and I remember him. He was a great uncle, man. He took care of his family. He did what he had to do. Not soon after that, my grandfather, that same man, right, who was a rock, right, for the whole family, he gets diagnosed with cancer. And I remember thinking at the time, even though I saw that, that he had faith, I still wasn't reading anything in the Bible, right? I was still on the fence about it. But he gets diagnosed with cancer. And I remember thinking to myself, this is going to be a story of victory. He's a Christian man. He's going to triumph, right? It's going to be a miracle. Everything is going to be fine. And then sadly, one day in 2016, he passes away. And by then I was already living in this house. That morning, my dad had came by early in the morning to put here in Texas, we had inspection stickers that we needed to put in the windshield of the vehicles, right? And they've done away with the program since then. But 2 stickers were needed back in the day. So he was working for the state of Texas as a vehicle inspector, and he came and put the sticker in my truck, right? As I was getting out of the shower, getting ready to work. And I was working at Walmart Pharmacy at the time. And he just tells me, he's like, I don't want you to panic. He says, but they found your grandpa unresponsive. He's in the hospital now. And so far, that's all we know. And he just says it like that, right? And I said, well, what do you mean unresponsive? Like, doesn't make any sense. Like, is he fine? He said, well, we don't know. He's like, this is all we heard, you know. And so the way that my aunt says that what happened was that night that he was coughing and that, you know, she was worried. She was taking care of him and my grandma. She was living there with them, and that he told her like ya ves, todo está bien, like everything is fine, is what he told her, and they found him unresponsive in the morning, so they took him to the hospital. And so I come into the room, and I'm getting ready to get to work, right? I'm putting on my slacks and my shoes, and my phone is ringing, and it's my dad. And I answer, you know, and my dad is breaking down on the line, man. And he just says, like, struggling to get the words out. The only words that he can muster are, he's gone. And I'm standing there, right? I have the towel on my shoulder. I still hadn't put my shirt on. And this long silence. And I just say, I'll be right there, right? I'll be right there. My little brother was in elementary school at the time. And I didn't go right away. I was in my room for a while looking at myself in the mirror, and I said, you know, I told God, you know, what is this? You know, how could you do this? How could you remove the only source of light left in the world, right? And leave us like this, you know? And I was angry. I was very angry, man. And, you know, it's another surreal moment. Trying to make sense of it again. Feels like a dream. We have the service and everything, you know. And you just, all that's left is just the memories, right? Of this man, you know. Nobody would have ever considered him, you know. Unless you got time to know him, right? But I considered him. And I remembered him. And in all this anger, right, in order to make sense of it, one night in 2016, I decide to open up the book of Proverbs. And the journey began around 11 at night, and I didn't finish reading until 4 a.m., the whole book. It doesn't take that long to read it, but I was very thorough reading the King James Version, which has some very, very difficult words and their understanding. That night, I remember I had never felt so vulnerable in my life, that words on paper could cut me so deep and expose me for who I was and say, this is what you are. You know, pathetic, useless, right? All these things, you know, and Proverbs doesn't say this, right? But there's a lot of comparisons between the fool and the wise man, and I was a fool. Returning to my vomit, you know, like a dog, it says. And I remember just weeping that night. And I swear it felt like if something had come in with a sword and cut me all up, man. And it was just like, this is what you are. You know, and I knew. I started saying out loud, like forgive me, like, I didn't know. I didn't know. But now I do, right? Forgive me. You know, you're real. I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry, you know. And that's how my journey began. With the book of Proverbs. And it was an instant awakening. You know, my eyes, I was blind, you know, before. Now all of a sudden I could see. And I'm starting to look at the world very differently. I'm starting to look at nature. I'm starting to look at everything. Everything is, there's more to meaning. There's more to life. There's more to everything, you know. Despite in our hardships, in our failures, in our shortcomings, right? All of it, it's at the hands of God, Started looking at everything differently, right? Without that, I still would have been, I'm just pathetic and useless, and there's no meaning to anything. But here now, there is, right? Everything has meaning. Nothing is just coincidence. Everything is with purpose, right? And I found my purpose. And it's just one of, to do the will of the Father. That's just how it is. I have no say beyond that. Wherever I am is because that's where I was supposed to be, because that's how it was supposed to happen. And I can't refute that. I can't argue with that. I can't question that. Sometimes in the moments, it, for lack of a better word, it sucks. It's frustrating. But then it always just comes back and it's like, it's still in control. Like God, it's like He's still in control. And everything that happened after that is what happened after that, but I have not let it go. I will not let it go. Nobody can take what my grandfather had. That he could be strong, for everybody. And you couldn't see it in the physical, right? But I assume that in the spiritual realm, Jesus was standing right next to him and holding him. In the spiritual realm, I'm sure of it. And if nobody could take that away from him, and I am doing everything I can, or I did everything I could to attain and learn that, no one could take it away from me either. And I would die believing that at the same time. That Jesus Christ is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, and that I am worthless and useless and not worthy, but by His blood and what He did on the cross, not just for me, but for anybody who would believe in Him and what He did, that I have found salvation through Him and through His grace, that even though I was unworthy, that He loved me and everybody else that much, that He would do that. And as the famous verse says, for God so loved the world, right, that He sent His only begotten Son, to save the world. And that's my testimony, into coming of the faith. And everything else is just, right, while it's sad, and I miss that I don't get to have the conversations I needed to have with my grandfather, right? I know that one day I will see him again and I will get to converse with him, sometime soon. And I know that, everybody who has passed is in a better place, at least those who I told what I had found before they passed, and they believe just the same. So I know that I'm gonna see them all again. And for now, right, in the whole learning, it was, the questions that I needed to ask. Well, I needed to ask him, but he wasn't here. So, but eventually, right, God, as I was reading through the Bible and stuff, and even today, man, I can read, pages, the same pages, and I always learn something new. I always pick up something new, right? It's a never-ending learning, right? And it's a lot of fun to spend time in the Word and meditate and pray and stuff. But yeah, man, I'm gonna cut this testimony short. So that was my journey into the faith, and it was just my personal journey, at least for me, and what motivated it and what got me started in it, and which I know I'm not the best, but every day I'm trying to be better than who I was yesterday, and that's all I can do, right? That's all I can do. So, yeah, man, I'll cut this video short and we'll call it here. So, y'all take care. God bless. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.